Hi, I'm Tony Stevens. The video you're going to watch now is going to be with a mag shader. We're going to use a 7 mag. We're going to show you how to do some color shading with it. Also on this video we're going to teach you how to make those 7 mags. So watch the video. These are some of the things you're going to need to make some mag shaders. In the needle making video we did before, we showed you how to make some flat shaders. What I'm going to show you here is a double stacked mag shader. These are real popular right now, and I'll talk about those later. What you're going to need is some flat needle bars, some shading needles. You're going to need a flat type razor blade to separate the needles out, and on your needle jig you want to use the flat slots on here. This particular jig comes with ones that can do flats, and you can switch this thing over to do round shaders. So let me get started and I'll show you how to make some flat mag shaders. Let me show you how you set up the needle jig so you can make yourself some really nice double stacked flat mag shaders. What you want to do first is you want to start out, we're going to do a 7 needle mag shader double stack. So we're going to take 7 needles, 2, 4, 6, 7. Make sure that the points are all facing one way. So check that with your eye loop if you can't see it good enough. Make sure all the tips are facing one way. We're going to set them in. I've got a flat piece set up here in the needle jig that will let the needles rest in here. There's a little groove, a flat groove. What I do is I'm going to I lay the needles in there. You can see how the ends are not straight. Kind of put my finger and put a little tension on there, take a little block of anything and just push them back. The whole idea here is you're trying to make sure that all the needles are lined up perfectly straight because we're going to solder on towards the back. Okay? So what we'll do now is we'll just take a little bit of flux. You want to just gently put your finger down and hold these needles straight. Just a little bit of flux at the back end of the needle. This is a little different than what you soldered before. You're just going to just hit it real quick, put a little tack on there. That's all you want to do. You're tacking the 7 needles together all at one time. Okay? So they should be tacked together and you should be able to take them out of your jig. Now I'll show you how to set them up with a razor blade to get 4 on top and 3 on the bottom. This is a little tricky part here with setting up your mag needles, but it takes a little practice, but you'll get it. What you're going to do is you're going to kind of hold the needles like this. What you want to do is weave this razor blade in between and pick up every other needle. So you're going to pick up, that'll give you the 4 on one side and the 3 on the other. So you just got to just back and forth with it, and you're actually just dropping one out, picking the next one up, dropping one out, picking the next one up. When you're all done, you're going to have 4 on one side, 3 on the other side, weaved in and out of the thing. I'm going to try to zoom in on this, and I'm going to show you this a little bit closer so you can see it. I laid this out for you so you could see a little closer. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 needles on the top I weaved in and out, and then there's 3 on the underside of there. All your soldering is going to be done on the top on this side, on the 4 side. And what you're going to do next is you're going to want to pull this back onto the needle so it's almost off the edge. And then hold it with your finger. Then we're going to put a little bit more solder right in this area. You're going to do it the same way. You're just going to just barely hit that thing with the soldering iron, because all you're doing is now this solder will actually go in between the 2 needles that you have set up, and it'll lock them in, so there's going to be 4 on the top and the 3 on the bottom. It'll cause a little separation because the razor blade's between them. So you can see I put a little bit of solder right on there. So now it's all set up and it's ready to go put on the bar, and we'll show you that now. Okay, we're going to put the needle bar back into the jig, and we're going to take our needle that we just made, and remember we tacked everything on the top side, on the side where the 4 needles were up, so that's going to stay up, and we're going to put the 4 facing down onto the bar. You can use flat bars, you can use round bars on here, whichever is easier for you. They make special bars that are just 4 flat needles, and they seem to work well. They just, instead of just the round bar, they've got a little notch cut there in them. You can see by the side that it's a little different. Or you can use a standard round bar. It'll work on either one. The flat bars are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll mount this one on a round bar just to show you it works either way. So just set the needle back on top, make sure it's in the jig all the way back so it's nice and flush. And again, this solder, this is the tricky part. You just want to be careful with the solder. You don't want to break apart the needles by putting too much solder on. So hold that down and just give it a little tack on there. What you're doing is just tacking it onto the bar. And now it should be onto your bar and you should be able to take it off. And then you're going to add a little bit more solder onto the back. You want to have enough solder on here to hold the needle good to the bar. So what you're going to do is put a little bit more flux in there. And again, you don't need a big wad of solder on here, just a little bit. Just it should make a nice little amount of solder. Now it's got a little dip in there like this, and it holds this to there. And that's pretty much it for making some mag shaders. If you wind up getting too much solder on here, you know, it's not even worth it. Just get rid of the needle and make another one. You want to make that thing so it rides nice and flat in the bar, in the tube, I mean, as it comes out. And you can set these all up different ways. You can do 7s, 14s, just depending on how you got the jig set up, how many needles. Just remember, weave them in every other one, and you always put the small amount facing down when you solder it onto the bar. So the small amount of needles that you have are going to be to the bottom, the larger number is going to be at the top. And it's a pretty simple setup. So what I'm going to show you here is some of the outline before you get to see the finished product with the shading. I'm not going to go through all this outline on video because you've already seen that on our other video. So what I'm going to do is just give you an idea of how it's going to look. This is a 7 round, or a 5 round I should say, sorry, outliner. I'm just using straight black ink. And once I get this piece outlined, then we'll get into the black shading with the mags, and we'll show you how all that goes. So, if you remember in the other videos, I start at the bottom and just work my way up with the outline, and that's just what I'm doing here. Some of the lines on this drawing are thicker black and they're heavier, but I'm just going to leave them as lighter lines now, and then we'll go back with, when we start doing the shading, and we'll darken up and thicken up some lines on here the way we want them. Now we're done with the outline, and this is the picture that we're going to be doing here. And when I was talking about that negative space before, you can see where there's some like water or whatever coming out of the mouth of this demon. So those are where I left all the blank spots in here. He's got like an eyeball up here that's going to shoot out. There's another tattoo lower on this arm here, and we're going to combine all this together. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do all the black shading in here with a mag shader. We'll show you how that's done. And some of this solid color fill, the black in the mouth and stuff. So if you watch the video now, you're going to see how that works. What we're going to do now is we're going to start with the black shading on here. And I'm using a 7 mag shader. And you're going to see a little bit different techniques on. I showed you on the other videos, you saw most of the work we did was with round shaders. This one we're going to use this mag shader. And you'll see the ink's going to go in, it goes in much quicker and darker. When you're using these mag shaders, you can work flat with them, or you can work a little bit of angle. I can get up in between these teeth in here just by turning this thing and working it on a little bit of an angle. And you're still using that same basic rotation like you did with the round shaders. You know, you're going to keep it turning. But when we get to the shading part, you can see you can do a little bit different stuff with these mag shaders. And you can see how solid they fill in quick. The black goes in real nice. You can brush shade out with some of this. I'm using this right now. I'm using just straight black ink here. I'm not thinning it down at all. This is just a straight solid black ink. You can see how nice and dark that goes in. You gotta remember we're gonna leave this open right in here because that's where some of that, I'm just gonna put a little bit of shade lines in here because there's some water that's gonna be shooting out on this piece here on this side. So with the round shaders, you're holding this machine a little more straight and going like this. With the flat shaders, you tend to run your hand this way and coming around a little bit more with it. So we're going to keep putting in all this black in here first. Once you start using these mag shaders, you're going to find it's going to take a little bit different if you've been using the rounds to get used to the angles that how you can use it, because you can cut a pretty thin line with this by just running the machine off to the edge a little bit more and using the edge of the needles rather than the whole needle flat. And that's the reason a lot of guys don't even use round shaders anymore. They go strictly with the mags because once you get used to using them, you can do just about anything you can do with a round shader with it, and it puts the ink in so much faster and save you a lot of time. And in the looks you can't do with a round shader some of the technique you can do with a flat. And you can use straight flat shaders. Mag shaders seem to be the big thing right now, and that's what everybody's using. A piece this size, I probably wouldn't use anything more than this 7. You know, you can go up to 14s and whatever. But a 7 on this piece is plenty big to use. And you can see we got all that black just about filled in already. It fills in quite rapidly with this. I'm gonna switch up. I'm gonna go off the black and I'm gonna do a little bit of shading with it now, and I'm gonna use a little bit of diluted black ink, and I'll show you the different looks that you can kind of get with this. We'll shade out some of this up in here. What you'll do with this, just by going back and forth over it like that, it looks like there's not much ink going in at all, but when you wipe it off, you'll start getting the nice soft gray tones with it. The whole thing with these, you don't want to have lines in your shading. You don't want to see the line of the needle. You've seen some of those old tattoos that you can see almost where every needle went into the skin and left little dots. And that's what you don't want to have. So if you want to shade this out round like that, you could take this, and this is really thin. It looks like it's black on the video, I'm sure, but when you wipe it off, you'll see it's got a nice thin look to it. And you can start to see how it starts to form from dark to a lighter gray shade. You got to remember on these videos when you're watching this, some of this stuff will look a little dark because there's a little bit more blood mixed in with the ink than there is ink itself. So the ink and the blood mixing together will tend to make it look dark, but when it heals, it'll heal to a real nice soft gray, and you'll get some real nice gray shading. So you can see by just going back and forth over it with real thinned out ink, once you wipe it down, you're going to get some nice softer gray shades out of that. I'm using somewhere around 2 to 3 drips of black ink in a little cup, and then I've diluted it with water. You can also use witch hazel. That works good. Depends on whatever you want to use. Just remember, if you start out with a lighter shade of black, you can always go back and darken it. Once you put it in and it's too dark, you're pretty much committed to that. That's what you're going to get. So start with thinner black when you're doing your shading. We're going to form some texture in this head here. I'm just going to add some little bumps and stuff in the head. I'm just taking that's all kind of watered down. You'll see when I wipe it down. I'm going to give it a little spray here because then you'll be able to see it a little clearer. I'll wipe it down. Now you can see this is almost a blood line. It's starting to get, it's just a little bit gray compared to here where we went from darker to lighter. And you just got to go through your whole piece like this, just looking at the drawing and deciding where you want the shadows and what you want dark and what you want shaded. Just remember you have a light source, so you know if the light's coming from this way, you want it dark on the other side. Basic art is all that is. Shade the horns out. The shading probably takes the longest to do on a piece like this. You want to get it all completely shaded out, all the right places. That's what makes it look nice. Otherwise you get that coloring book look, which I talked about before. We don't want that. You want all nice shading in here. All along these eyes, and every place where it's supposed to look indented is where you want to pull out some black ink. Give it some nice shadows. And you can see I'm getting, even with that shadowing, I'm getting into some tight little spots with this flat shader. I think that's the problem some people have with them. They think it's such a wide, flat needle that they can't get into anything tight with it, but you can. I could follow that right along the bottom of that little eyeball there without a problem. It looks like you're putting in a lot of ink when you're doing this here, when you're doing this shading like that, but that's mostly watered down ink, so it's not going in real dark and real solid. It's just giving a nice soft shade to it. So I'm going to keep going through this and shade this all out, and then you can come back and see what that's going to look like. I'll let this run for a few more minutes here and you can see where I'm going with it. Just remember, everybody's got a different technique when they shade with any kind of a needle. So you kind of have to pick up your own style when you do it, but this video will sure get you a good start on what you're supposed to be looking like when it's done. And again, you can see this is more water than it is ink in here. When you wipe it off, you're going to see more. You'll see a little bit of blood, more blood in the skin than you will when you're doing solid colors. But just by taking that watered down ink and going over it like that, it'll eventually build up to a nice soft shade. You can see I'm pulling it off of here like this, and I'm lifting as I come out so I don't wind up with a hard line at the bottom. And this will give you that nice rounded look here. I'm going to wipe this off and show you where we're at right now. So you can see the different effects you can get. You can get a real solid black, you can get these softer lines. Now here I had no outline at all, but I just went in and I'm going to put a little bit of texture up in the head like this, just by taking that shader and just whipping it around. So we're going to finish shading it up and then we'll get into the color part with that. Now you can see we're done with the black shading on here. We've got it all shaded in where we want. I'm going to do a little bit of the color in here now so you can get an idea how that works. Got all the darks and all the blacks in and everything. So we're going to start with this. And you'll notice too on this picture that these colors, they start with some real solid colors and they lighten up. So that's how I'm going to show you what to do. And you go right over your black shading with this color here. And now I'm going to look for a kind of a solid look here with this orange. And you'll see that, like I said before, this mag shader will put this color in pretty quick. You'll get a good idea of what's happening here. You can thin down these colors too the same way you did the blacks when you start getting to the lighter shades of them. Or just dip your needle in some water and then hit the color. Because what you're going to want to get here is some real nice solid stuff. And I'm going to leave a little bit of the skin tone showing towards the edge of the tattoo. Right along this outline, I'm going to leave this open. I'm just going to bring the color almost to the edge, because the skin tone will actually act as a highlight when you're coloring. And you're basically putting in this color like you did the solid black shading, except in spots we're going to leave where we want it to highlight. You can see I've taken the orange and I've gone around here, but I've left the center a little bit open. And then I'm just going to kind of sweep shade it in a little bit more, and kind of just fade it out to a skin tone, and let the skin act as some of the highlight. I know on these videos sometimes this color looks all the same, but you'll see the difference when you start doing the tattoo yourself, what you're going to achieve with sweep shading it, and just pulling in a little bit of colors around the edges. Just got to remember, you're using darks and lights, and you can do it all with the same one shade of ink. You don't have to change inks to get different shades. You can do it the same way just by thinning it out. When you get up into here, we got some bigger areas to shade out. And you can do basically the same way I was showing you when you did that gray shade. Take the ink and just keep working it over the skin a few times like that. And when you wipe it off, you'll get it from a dark to a lighter shade. And they have a real nice soft effect when it's finished. You'll get some dark lines, and then again you got to remember there's blood in here, so some of that shading is going to look a little darker than what it's really going to heal to. But you get the idea how it works. Don't be afraid to take that color right over that black shading. Take it right over that soft color, because it'll take that orange down, it'll make it darker in spots, it'll make it lighter in spots. Right where I gray shaded all in between here, I'm just going over that with the color. And the same thing in here, but I'll leave some highlights in there. I'm going to put some yellows in here and some other shades and colors. Basically, I'm kind of going to just shade with the same shade of orange here. I'm using a real bright orange to do the face. But everywhere that I shaded, I'm going right over it with the color. On some of the other pieces we did on the videos, you can see I left the shading alone. I didn't even go near it with any colors or anything, but now we want to brush shade this color in. In some spots you want it real solid. So it's just a matter of working it, looking at the picture to see where you were at with it. All along these edges where if it was dark with black shading, then it's going to be dark with color. And the spots that I want to leave light, I'm just going to sweep it out like this. So I'm going to bring that needle in and out and let it build up just a softer shade. I'm going to spray this off a little bit and you can see. So you can see we're starting to leave some highlights, starting to fill in some solid lines in here. You probably want to try to work your solid colors first, and just slowly fade out in certain spots. Then you can go back with a little bit of washed out color and put it in where you need it. Just remember, don't go over the skin too many times with these mag shaders either. You don't want to tear it up. You should be able to get it in there nice and solid. Couple sweeps. You can see I'm not going back and forth over the same areas over and over again. I'm hitting pretty much one time. It's putting in enough ink, and that's where I'm leaving it. You should be able to do that. You shouldn't have to go back and keep going over and over a spot. When you're bringing the shading out like this, I'm hitting it 1, 2, 3 times over it. And I'm not putting as much pressure on the machine either. when I'm going in and out of the skin like that, because then I'll get that nice soft shaded look. If you're going to keep that same pressure as you are when you're doing solid color, you're not going to get much of a shade look, because everything's going to come out too solid. It's a feel. You'll get the feel after a while. You'll get to know how hard you're pushing it in, and there shouldn't be a lot of pressure when you're doing this anyway. It should be comfortable for the guy that's sitting here getting it. You don't have to hammer it real hard. They talk about a feather touch when you put in color, and that's pretty much what you're doing. Even where the solid color goes, I'm using a little bit more pressure, but not much. Not much at all. We'll just slowly got to keep working around this piece till we get all this orange in here. But now you get kind of an idea. You see where I'm starting to leave the light shades coming through. Some of that I'll take some washed out orange and I'll just shade real lightly over it. I'll just go over it just to give it a little skin tone, and then I'll put some yellows back in there. So I'm going to do a little bit more with this, and then we'll show you how it progressed and what it's going to look like for the next step. I've seen a lot of different ways to put in ink, a lot of different guys. If you go to conventions at all, it's a good thing to do. You can watch how other guys do it. But you really got to develop your own style, and these videos were made to show you one way to do it. Everybody has a style to tattooing, and you'll develop your own style as you more and more practice, but now at least you'll have an idea what it's supposed to look like and how the ink should be going in. You shouldn't have to keep working it over and over. I've had people tell me that, you know, their customers were getting kind of scabbed up when they were trying to heal, and that was just from overworking the tattoo. They're just not, their machine's either not set right. As far as setting these mag shaders, I've got this thing just like I was doing with the round shaders. I've got it back into the tube, and I have it just a slightly bit back inside the tube. The round shaders, we were letting it hang out just a little bit. This one I kind of pull it back a little bit inside the tube. I don't need it to go in as far. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep going around with the orange. We'll finish that up, and then we'll show you how to put in some of the highlights. You can see now we're done with all the orange shading. I kind of zoomed in here a little bit so you can see. Left some skin tones open here and there. That we're going to do with some yellow highlights, and you'll kind of get a whole drift. I'm going to show you one more picture of this when it's complete. I'm going to go in there and put some of the yellow highlights in, and I'll show you that right now. It's basically the same thing I did with the orange, except we're going to just start filling up some of those spaces out there. You can kind of see what it looks like right there. So now you can kind of see it's all shaded in with the blacks. We got the orange in there. Now what we're going to do is put some highlights in. This particular piece is going to be a whole arm piece, so where I've got the smoke and the water that's going to come out on here, that's going to be done at a later time. I'm just leaving some open negative space here so I can pull that water and smoke and stuff through. But for this video, we're just kind of showing you how that mag shader works and the amount of color you can get in there and how quick you can do it. I'm going to take the yellow now, and I'm going to do some fill in here with some yellows. I'm just using a straight, pretty bright yellow ink, and then I'm also going to take a little bit of a golden yellow just to kind of bring up some of the oranges in there. You can go over that orange with a little bit of yellow, and it'll kind of change the tone. I'm going to start with that kind of this is more of a golden yellow, but you can see I'm going to go right over the orange with this. But I'm going to do it light. I'm just almost like I'm just putting a little bit of a brush shade in on there. So I'm not trying to pound this color in either. I'm going to go from that dark orange to this color, this golden yellow, and that's going to give it it'll give it a nice effect when it's all done. And again, I know on the video these colors might not look as bright as you'll see as you're doing them, but you're getting the idea what I'm talking about here. And this mag shader, it'll just put a nice soft tone on there without pounding a lot of color. I know some guys that will go back with rounds and they soften up different edges and they do different things with them, but you know, it's just a matter, once you learn how to use all the different needles, it's a matter of what you want to do with them and how you want to make your piece look. That's what I like about these mag shaders. You can you can kind of overlay the colors without it chewing up the skin. If you do it real nice and soft and just kind of brush over, it'll put just enough color in where it bring out some nice highlights. When the piece is all done, you'll see what it's going to look like. And remember, when you're using yellow and orange together, the blood in the skin will turn that yellow ink kind of an orangey color, so it's kind of hard to determine the two until it's all healed up. You just got to kind of watch it. You'll know where you put that ink in after the blood settles out a little bit. So I'm just taking this dark yellow and I'm just putting it in certain spots. I'm not going to use it all over. I'm going to switch over to the lighter stuff, and I'll just kind of show you what that's going to look like. So I'll just clean out my gun here for a second. I'm going to wipe that off. I'm sure it's all going to look orange on this video where I went over some of that, but just follow what I'm doing and you'll get the drift. What's going to happen when it heals, you know, if you've done some tattoos already, you know what it looks like when it heals up. Now I'm going to go with that real bright yellow and put it in. You can see one hit with this mag shader and it's pretty much putting the color right down where I want it. I'm not having to go back over and over it again. With those round shaders, it seems like sometimes you have to keep going over the same spot just to get a nice solid color fill. These mag shaders put it in nice. I'm going to take this yellow and I'm going to bring it out, but I'm still going to leave a little bit of skin showing on certain spots because the skin makes a great highlight. You don't have to make everything solid like the coloring book. You know, you can leave some of that skin showing around the edges and it looks really nice when it's done. But like around these eyebrows and stuff, that's where you want the nice highlights. And again, I'm taking this and I'm going solid, and then I'm kind of brushing out into the orange with the mag shader, and that's what's giving it that. It'll give it a real nice soft effect when it's done. It almost kind of looks airbrushed when it's finished. You can experiment with different types of mag shaders. There's, you know, like I'm using here, the 7, like I told you, you can use 14s. There's double stacked mags. They all just put the ink in a little bit different. So, you know, the best thing to do is either make your own if you watch that video on how to make them, or you can buy them pre-made and just try them on different spots on a tattoo and you'll see the effects you're going to get. I'm going to finish up this yellow now and then we'll show you what it looks like when it's done.